Welcome, attendees, to the evolution of data and technology in radiology. My name is Eugenio Reynoso, Director of Marketing here at HealthLevel. Today, I'll be your MC, and we are joined by our guests, Rick Long and Ray Scott. Rick Long is a HealthLevel Advisory Board member and former President and Chief Executive Officer of Center for Diagnostic Imaging, now known as RAYUS. Also joining us to moderate the conversation is Ray Scott, Chairman of HealthLevel, known in IT, Health IT for pioneering health information exchanges. Rick and Ray, welcome.
Thanks, Eugenio.
Thanks, Eugenio.
Yeah, so a few housekeeping items for our guests. Today's webinar is more of a conversation, but despite this, we invite you to ask your questions. We'll answer them towards the end, but you should see a button at the bottom for Q&A, which you can click into and ask your questions. And again, we'll circle back afterwards. That said, I am going to turn the conversation over to Ray, and so he can continue with Rick as well. Let me get you guys spotlighted here, and then turn it over to you, Ray, and enjoy your conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugenio. Good to have you here, Rick. You've got 30 plus years of experience in the radiology industry, leading to the presidency of CDI, now RAYUS. And I have a number of questions that I'd like to ask you, some historical and some about the future. Prior to the use of computer systems, how did radiology businesses really understand how to operate well? Where did they get their insights from? How did they run their businesses?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say 30 years is a long time to be in any industry, and I never thought I'd be seen as an elder statesman, but I guess I am at this point. So I'll go back, probably easier, just on my earliest days in radiology, which were the early 1990s, and just talk a little bit about that, and that'll kind of bring us into the present day. But all the way back then, everything was on paper and film, printed paper and film back in those days. So a patient would come in for a scan, they'd get a stack of papers they'd fill out, we'd put that in a clipboard, and that would follow them throughout their journey. After the scan, we printed film. Those films needed to be collated and labeled for the radiologist, and then ultimately had to get to the radiologist. And many times, the radiologist wasn't in the location the scan was done. So we had couriers that had to move those printed films and the patient information to the radiologist so they could interpret the scan. Then to interpret the scan, they interpreted into a tape recorded device, basically. And then that tape recorded device needed to be brought to a transcriptionist to transcribe the report. So it was extremely more labor intensive to get done. When you think of, you needed extra people to label and collate films, print all the paper, collate all that, the couriers to get all the information to the radiologist. And then after all that was done, the reports were transcribed, and then the referring doctors wanted the films and the reports, so we had to get them to them. We didn't have electronic methods, so we had couriers to deliver the reports and other people to deliver reports and films to the referring office. So very labor intensive. And then at the end of the day, we needed to store. We were required to store all those reports. So we had to have huge storage facilities to store all these films and reports. And there were several years of them. So very inefficient certainly by today's standards. We use fax machines a lot to get information back and forth to the referring office and just to communicate within our own operation. So it was a lot of old technology, pretty inefficient. And then you asked a little bit about just metrics and data. Really, any metrics, performance or operating metrics back in those days were very rudimentary. We used kind of paper ledgers that we created at a facility level to count really just some basic things like, how many scans did we do today, or how many phone calls, inbound calls did we have, maybe from what referring office, but it was really all just kind of basic stuff that we had back then.
So I guess the first digital revolution for radiology was probably the adoption of PACS and RIS systems.
Yes.
How did that change the behavior of the business?
Well, I think it was revolutionary, but it didn't, you think of a revolution that occurs very quickly, and it didn't happen quickly. So I said I got involved in radiology in the early 90s. PACS actually were developed, the concept of a PACS system, and that's digital archiving of images. That was developed way back in the 70s, but it was kind of a research lab thing. And it really didn't gain any traction till probably the mid to late 80s. And even then it was more in a development phase and really started to become into vogue or into usage in really the mid 90s. And what drove that is initially we didn't have really networks to send electronic imaging around on. And as that started to get developed, we needed to broaden the bandwidth because images are, they create a lot of data. So to move that around electronically was very difficult. So as that became more developed and the software with the PACS systems, they were clunky initially in the late 80s, early 90s. So by the mid 90s, they were usable, and the radiologist adoption started to pick up and really started to take off in the mid to late 90s for PACS.
What about the data that those systems provided? Did that provide additional insight on business operations?
Well, on business operations, PACS, not so much. It gave us some metrics on radiologist productivity and things like that. But really, what started to give us a lot of data was about this time, radiology information systems or RIS systems started to be developed. So we were able to get a lot of data out of that, both patient clinical data, but also operational data that came out of the RIS system. And those were kind of mid to late 90s that those started coming in. But as they and the PACS system started to come in together, it really was starting to provide some great data. And then on top of that, we had things like digital dictation that came into vogue. So we got rid of the tape recorders for the radiologists to dictate into and having to send all that around. And we were able to get the radiologist's voice dictating the images stored digitally and moved digitally. So we're able to be more efficient as well. And that also provided some metrics just on radiologists' time to interpret a report, turnaround times, things like that. So all of those systems started to provide some really great data for us. Really, I'd say an abundance of data. We could get deep into clinical and operational data. But each of these systems didn't talk really well to each other either. And we didn't have a good way to present the data or where to put it all collectively together.
So where was the data stored, and what emerged from that era? Yeah,
great question. So it really was disparately stored. So RIS had its own set of information, PACS had its own archived information, and the dictation system had its own. But as we started to see that we could pull operating data and reports, really operating data, there was valuable data, and we started to notice with both PACS and RIS and digital dictation that we had this ability to be more efficient, and we could see we were getting more efficient, but we knew we could get more efficient. And this data that we could pull out of a RIS system could provide us with some really valuable data around how we can get more efficient. But pulling it disparately out of each system and then trying to create reports, the systems just didn't talk to each other and the data didn't line up right. So this kind of spurred the development of a repository where we could dump data from all these collective disparate systems into one repository and use software such as, as simple as Excel to load the data in and kind of rationalize it all and make it talk to each other. So it was kind of the first move into and the development of data warehouses, and that was really kind of early to mid 2000s.
Okay, what were the additional opportunities that presented, and perhaps some of the additional challenges?
Well, so it actually gave us data to look at. The problem was we didn't have a good way to we could look at the data, but to be able to manipulate the data and view it in different ways and produce reports that, an average person in a center could really interpret and read to make it really valuable to them. We didn't have that. So there started to be a development in the IT world for software that sat on top of the data warehouses that would help you produce reports and display them. And namely, a couple of the, I would say the top most popular ones in the industry, and certainly ones we used in my former company, was Tableau and Power BI are two examples. But these two, they're great at manipulating and organizing data and producing reports, but you really need to be trained in it. It's an advanced form in Power BI is really an advanced form of Excel. It's Excel on steroids, we used to say, and you really need to be an expert user to use it. So our operational leaders in our centers, and I would guess any other radiology organization kind of faced the same challenges, was that they couldn't really use it. The adoption was really slow or really non-existent almost, because they didn't know how to use it. And so we actually had to hire people in IT and business analysts that would create the data, create the reports for the operational leaders. So they would call and say, hey, I need a report that would show this. Can you do it? And these people would produce it. But the problem with that, it kind of mitigated the efficiencies we were trying to create by finding these reports and helping our organization operate more efficiently.
So what do you see as the next kind of technological advancement in this arena?
Well, Ray, I think we're kind of there, and it's these business radiology operations platform, and we've started to develop these. I know you at HealthLevel have. There's other products like this, but basically what it's done is it takes this data we talked about, that initially, we knew we didn't know how to organize it. Now we figured out how to build a data warehouse to dump it all and kind of rationalize it and make it talk to each other. And then we developed these ways to view the data and create these reports, but they weren't real user friendly. The radiology business operations platforms today is really just great software that helps aggregate that data and produce very intelligent, actionable reporting for everybody in the organization.
When you say everybody in the organization, what do you mean by that?
Well, when we first started, doing reporting, getting data out of, the risks and the PACS, that went to senior leadership and maybe some middle management that got it, maybe operational leaders. In our world, it would be a center manager, would be, that person, that level, or certainly the senior people in the organization got all kinds of reports, but we couldn't get, or it just wasn't efficient to get that down to the functional level. And I think that is so important today for individuals to be able to see how their individual area is performing or how they're performing, and have a report right in front of them that's easy to interpret, graphical, I would say, and actionable. It presents them with some insights on how they can improve what they're doing or what they're doing right, and gives them, almost like, the pat on the shoulder kind of thing. So that's what I think these do today. It's smart software that helps aggregate this data and present it down to the individual level. So if I'm a C-suite, maybe a chief operating officer, and I want to see how all of my radiology operations are performing across the spectrum, the reports I get every day are looking at that. If I'm a center manager, I have one center, or maybe it's a radiology department in a health system, I get data on that particular area that I'm managing. But if I'm a individual contributor, like a functional area person, like an MRI tech, I will get different reporting to see how is my scanner doing today? How's that performing today? How's my area doing? Or take it just out of even the scanning area. We have large call centers in most radiology operations. Maybe I'm a call center manager and I can get reporting on call volumes and all the kind of statistics I can do to really manage that area. And maybe I'm a scheduler in a radiology operation. I can get reports on how I'm doing individually or how my team that I'm working with are doing. So it's reporting that I can get. And I always say people want to do the best job they can do. I think 99% of people working today want to do that. They want to do good at their job. This data that we're getting off of radiology business operations platforms are now helping people do that. It's giving them actionable insights to act on and improve what they're doing and become more efficient, more productive, and deliver better care, better service to their customers.
There have been various reports recently about labor shortages in the market. Do you think that that's going to impact radiology groups going forward? And will this technology help in any way?
Well, I think it already has impacted us. It's impacting us, I would say. And I think that's going to continue for a while. We have both a labor shortage and then we have, inflation in labor costs. And I think that a solid radiology business operations platform is going to help us be more efficient with our labor and help individuals be more efficient with their jobs in terms of what they do. So it's going to help us operate better there. I think we're going to all need to get by with fewer people until this is fixed. And if we can do our job more efficiently, that's going to help us do that. And then I think too, with these systems, I think being able to manage your operation more efficiently by using this reporting to operate in all areas, not just with labor, but all areas of the operation, it's going to help you offset costs that are going up, like labor costs.
Okay. So burnout's another issue that we see a lot written about, and I think that scheduling radiologists in a manner that doesn't cause burnout is probably an important feature for these business operations platforms to address. Do you agree?
Absolutely. And I would speak specifically to radiologists. Yes, I mean there is reporting here that comes out of a really strong radiology business operations platform that will help us make our radiologists more efficient, help them do their jobs more seamlessly, and help with that to offset the burnout that we're hearing and seeing with radiologists. But it's not just radiologists. They're certainly a group that we should be concerned about, but it's other areas in the radiology business where we see that too. And I do think if you can help people work smarter and easier by presenting reports to them on a daily basis that they can act on and help them be more efficient, I think you're going to help reduce burnout. It should.
I think that presenting reports that they can act on was the phrase you used. I think that that's particularly important. In the past, my feeling has been that it's been the C-suite that's been looking at the reports and making decisions about maybe how to modify the business. And that's largely because the way in which the data, in my view, the way in which we presented the data, it's not been actionable by individuals in the team. So do you think that an important component of a business operations platform should be to present data in an actionable manner?
Yeah, I mean, my view on that is that a solid platform is one that actually tailor makes a dashboard for the individual and what they're doing. So like I said earlier, if I'm the chief operating officer, or maybe I am the head of radiology operations for a large health system, I need a set of data that spans the entire radiology operation in that organization, and data that I can look at every day very easily on my computer that will tell me how are we doing in key areas that I need to know. But if I'm a I'm a radiology department leader in a hospital, or I manage an outpatient imaging center. I need a different set of data that focuses on that business that's probably a little bit more granular. That needs to speak to me, and it needs to be data I can act on. And I would say too, all this data presented, if it's just in Excel spreadsheets, I think it's harder to view every day. And having it where it's graphical and interactive, I think, is really important too. And it allows you to get more information out of that, drill into problem areas, and be able to take action and fix those things. And let me go just a little bit further. I do believe that everybody in an organization needs to be able to see performance and operating data on how they're doing or how their team is doing. So that goes right down to the individual contributor to have metrics on that. And I think when you do that, you're going to get more buy-in. I think it'll offset burnout because people are getting feedback on how they're doing and able to make changes really on an hourly or daily basis of what they're doing to improve on what they're doing. So it creates all kinds of wins within an organization. But I think the key to it is not just having it at the C-suite level or senior or middle management level even. It can't stop there. It's got to go throughout the organization. And I just say one other thing, this is back before we had all this. In my old company, we bonused everybody in the organization based on 4 simple metrics that we asked everybody to be focused on and deliver on. And if they did that and we hit our goal, we bonused every quarter. Well, we didn't have a graphical interface to present that to them. So we sent out, it ended up being via email, but before that, even we print and mailed all the centers in our operation the metrics, and they would hang them in the break room. And it caused, I saw it immediately, that people would focus on those 4 metrics. I'd walk in a center and they'd tell me how we were doing against them. So I think this is the same thing, just, fast forward into the future where someone gets it right on their computer, almost in a portal, and they see it and they see how they're doing. And like I said, from everybody in the organization, top to bottom.
Yeah, that sounds like great alignment. What other challenges are on the horizon for radiology businesses?
Well, I think, we talked about labor shortages. I think that's going to be not just, technologists, which we all think about, but I think it's going to be radiologists. We have a looming shortage there. And then we're having trouble finding administrative staff too in radiology. So labor shortages is definitely a top of the list item. So what does that tell me? We're going to need to be more efficient. We need to operate. We need to do more with less, basically. But other areas I think that are kind of headwinds for radiology is probably reimbursements. There's some downward pressure on reimbursements. We saw that with Medicare this year. We've kind of seen it every year. But then the commercial insurers too have kind of followed that to some degree in some areas. And there's some concerns that, with certain regulatory actions, that it's given the payers more, commercial payers in particular, more leverage to bring rates down. So we're just going to see downward pressure on rates, on reimbursements. And so that causes you again to think about how do we do more with less? We're going to do the same amount of work with less revenue. So how do we counterbalance that? That's that efficiency piece. And through a solid radiology business operations platform that's presenting efficiency and operating data is really going to help you manage that. And, then I just say the third thing is really kind of along that line is the inflationary pressures on all of our costs. We've seen that go up over the last year or so, and I think that's going to continue for a while. So again, it talks to being able to be more efficient in other areas to offset any cost increases we have as well.
What about the competitive scene? I mean, are radiology groups competing aggressively here? And if so, who wins in that competition?
Well, I don't see us as kind of a fierce competition industry, but there is competition there. I think the winners are the ones that deliver the highest quality and the best patient care overall, if they can deliver on that. So again, getting back to what we're talking about today, using data and using analytics and using a platform to help measure, report, and act on that data is vitally important for clinical quality. And it's going to be very important for delivery of care, customer service, patient care type aspects. So this will help to deliver on that. And to me, those are the winners, the ones that are the best in every market that does that. They're going to rise to the top. And then you need staying power. You need to last. So efficiency is an important part of that because our margins are getting squeezed by what we just talked about. So you're going to have to operate more efficiently. And again, having this backbone of this operation, this radiology business operations platform is going to help you measure and act on how your operations are performing on all those levels.
I noticed when you talked about business operations platforms, you talked about dashboards for everybody in the organization. When you talked about the data warehousing, you talked about reports. Dashboard to me implies an element of kind of real-time nature to it, so you can see what's happening in real time. If you think about the dashboard on your car, it has to be in real time. You need to know what's happening now. Whereas some of the reports that we got in the past were telling us what happened a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whatever. Do you think the real-time nature of these business operations platforms will have a significant impact on productivity?
Absolutely. And I think we need to really be successful in the competitive world of radiology with all the pressures we have is you need to be looking at the backward data in real time, but you also need forward-leading data that you need to be looking at. And a strong platform, again, is going to give you both. And we talked about, the actionable insights. That's some of that forward-looking data to say, okay, this is happening today. Maybe this happened yesterday, or this is the trend over the last week or the last month. But here's how this projects out going forward, and almost nudges the individual to act on those issues.
Okay, we have a question from the audience, Rick. It says, how is AI disruptive technology going to affect radiologists and technologists? And is the industry worried about advancements in the AI age?
Well, I don't think we should be too worried about it. I think it's something we need to look at and embrace. And just my view on AI, we've been talking about for probably 5 or 6 years now in radiology. I think initially the first, entries in this there was a lot of talk about AI doing the work of the radiologists and maybe even eliminating or reducing the population of radiologists or the need for radiologists. And I don't think that's really where it's evolved so far. And I don't really see it going there. I think the first contributions have really been more on the efficiency, whether it's for the clinical the operating side of the radiology operations, or it helps the radiologist become more efficient. I think that's really where the contributions have been so far. We are seeing some clinical AI things that I think are going to have some real benefit to us and to radiologists in particular. And that's exciting, but I think that needs more work. And I think that's a few years before it really comes along. But, we talked about labor shortages, and we talked about, both for technologists, administrative people in radiology, and then for radiologists. So AI that efficiency component can help us offset some of those things. So I think it's going to be an important technology we need to watch and monitor. And I don't think, it's a one size fits all either. I think there are certain organizations that need certain components of AI and not some others, and vice versa. So it's really something I think down to the organizational level is really to look at and see what will benefit you most.
Great. Thank you, Rick. I think we're out of time now, so I'm going to hand it back to Eugenio. Are you there, Eugenio?
I am here. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you to our guests as well for staying over for a bit on this insightful conversation. And thank you again for the submitted questions. As Ray mentioned, we're out of time. Thank you again, Ray and Rick. So what we'll do next is we'll wrap up this webinar. We will have a recording available afterwards if you'd like to review it, and we'll notify you by email. Thank you again for attending, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Rick.
Bye-bye.